Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are again today, coming together in this beautiful day in order for us to be able to continue with our powerful story of King Hezekiah. And what a powerful testimony and prophetic story it is for us to be able to glean from the pages of our Bible, because like I said, if the Father repeats something 3 times in the Bible, then you must understand that there is something about this that He is wanting to highlight in our lives, to make sure that this is of the extreme importance. And this is what we must understand if we are going to be leaders, if we're going to be the kings that the Father is going to raise up, or if we're going to be leaders for the Father, or even if we are just people serving the Father, there are absolute gems, nuggets of gold to be able to glean from everything that Yeshayahu is revealing to us in these 2 chapters that we're going to cover today. As today we are going to look at chapter 38 and chapter 39, so that we may be able to finish off the story about this very powerful king. And then we will just briefly look at his son and what happened there, so that we can get the full understanding of the significance of a leader and the difference that a leader will make if it is a leader that is going to be led by Abba Yahuwah and not by the lusts of the flesh and the pride of life and greed and everything else that goes with it. So let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you, my Father. I thank you for the wonderful testimony that you are giving us in this day and over these last few days, in being able to reveal to us this powerful King, Hezekiah, so that we may be able to get the deeper revelation of what it is that Yeshayahu is having to make sure that he's pointing out this king. He's giving the account of his life, and he's giving us the revelation of what we need to understand about King Hezekiah, for us to understand that this is relevant in our lives, and that is why it's been put in this prophetic book over 4 chapters, so that we may be able to make a mental note of it, and we take it to heart, and we will go and understand what it is that the Father is trying to show us in this hour, so that we can do great introspection within ourselves, knowing that there is a warning for us, just like there was for King Hezekiah, and for us to be able to understand who do we put our trust and our faith in, and what is it that makes people rise and what is it that makes people fall. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you, Father, for that which you are doing in this hour and that which you are revealing in this hour, so that we may be able to come into that place where you can continue to shine your magnifying glass in our hearts. And as we look into these chapters of your Bible, and we're going to look at Kings, and we're going to look at Chronicles, and we're going to look at Isaiah, the 3 places that you have chosen to speak about this powerful King. Abba Yahuwah, I pray, speak to our minds, speak to our hearts. Let us be those that are not just going to give you lip service, but that we will be able to be those that will be transformed and changed, and being able to put things into practice. Because the word is not here just to be able to tickle our ears, or just to be able to give us a puffed upness in our hearts to know that we can quote all the amount of scriptures that we can, but for us to truly put them into practice. And I know it's more important that we would put a few scriptures into practice than having to understand to quote them all, because you are wanting a people that will truly shama, that they will hear and that they will obey, that they will hear and that they will do. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I praise you and I thank you, and truly I am humbled before you because there's different ways that one could possibly look at this if we were to read it just in the surface of what it is. But if we do not seek and we do not go deep and we do not understand what is going on over here. And I thank you, Father, for the deeper revelation that you are going to give us to truly understand this powerful King and the repercussions that come from the decisions and the choices that we make. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise and I just want to thank you. I thank you, Abba Yahuwah, that you alone will be able to come and have your way as we continue to proceed by having to look at this powerful prophetic understanding of this King. In Yeshua's name, Amen. So let us start reading as we are going to read in chapter 38, Yeshayahu, chapter 38, verses 1. In those days, Hezekiah was sick and near death, and Yeshayahu the prophet, the son of Amos, came to him and said to him, Thus said Yahuwah, command your house, for you are going to die and not live. Now that is a very stern word for Yeshayahu to be able to bring to Hezekiah. He was not just a king, but he had become a friend. And Yeshayahu now has to go to him because obviously in a time of prayer, as he was praying for the king, Father has given him the instruction to go to him, to say to him, command your house. So what did he mean by command your house? And so at the end of the day, he was telling him that he was to get his house in order. And he was to be able to get his house in order and able to put things in the right order of the way that it should be, because the Father was going to be able to bring the sickness of his was going to end in death. And you must understand, what is Hezekiah, what does his name mean? His name means Yahuwah is my strength. And now you must understand, if the Father is telling him, get your life in order, get your house in order, you are going to die, then his strength is in the Father to know that this is the Father's will, then it's going to be for the best. And this is what we're going to need to understand as we are going to have to read and understand the life of King Hezekiah. So now we are going to have a look at 2 Chronicles. Before we continue to read through chapter 38, we are going to first have to look at 2 Chronicles chapter 32 for us to be able to understand the fuller story of why King Hezekiah got sick. So let's look and see. And we are going to read from verses 20, because remember we finished chapter 37, what happened in chapter 37. And we read, and it says, the sovereign Hezekiah and the prophet Yeshayahu, son of Amos, prayed about this and cried out to the heavens. And Yahuwah sent a messenger, because why? The king of Ashur, Sanherib, he was coming and he was going to bring destruction upon the land upon Jerusalem, and he was going to bring destruction, and he was giving many threats, and he was exalting himself, and he was speaking up against the Most High, and with a lot of arrogance and a lot of pride. And so as we understood, as we read, pride comes before a fall. And here we see that he says in verse 21, and Yahuwah sent a messenger who cut down every mighty brave one, both the leader and the commander, in the camp of the sovereign of Ashur, and he returned shamefaced to his own land. Remember, it was told that he would die in his own land, and went into the house of his mighty one, and there some of his offspring caused him to fall by the sword. So exactly like the Father had said, I am going to cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. Thus Yahuwah saved Hezekiah, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sanherib, the sovereign of Ashur, and from the hand of all others, and guided them on every side. So can you just imagine the word that must have gone forth? Wow, can you just imagine? Everybody must have been exalting this king Hezekiah, and the mighty victory that there was and what happened. And so we look at this and it says, and many brought gifts to Yahuwah at Jerusalem and presented to Hezekiah, sovereign of Yehudah, and he was exalted in the eyes of all the nations thereafter. So you see, because of this mighty thing that the Father had done on his behalf, he has been raised up, and now he gets seen as being this mighty king, and he serves a mighty Yah, and now he's receiving gifts, and the people are coming and they are exalting him in the eyes of the nations thereafter. In those days, Hezekiah was sick and near death, and he prayed to Yahuwah, and he spoke to him and appointed a sign for him. So this is where we are going to finish off over here. So in those days he was sick, and so he appointed for him, so his praise, and that's why we're going to stop there, because we're going to be backwards and forwards between Isaiah 38, between 2 Kings and between 2 Chronicles, for us to be able to get the whole story, because we want to understand. Because if we're just going to read Isaiah chapter 38 and 39, we're not going to get the fullness of the story, because it looks like this is a king with a serious sickness and he's coming before the Father, and so many people use this as an example to be able to come and pray many soulish prayers before the Father. And so let us read from verse 2 in Isaiah, Yeshayahu 38. And Hezekiah turned his face towards the wall and prayed to Yahuwah, and said, I pray, O Yahuwah, please remember how I have walked before you in truth and with perfect heart, and have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. So understand the very first thing that he's saying of here, I've walked with a perfect heart. And already we have just read that he got sick because he did not have a perfect heart. That something has happened. And why is he sick? And so he had become elated in the eyes of all the nations. And we are going to understand that this is one of the reasons why he has got sick. And he's saying, with a perfect heart, and have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. So, sometimes we can present our case and we can think ourselves to be more righteous than we really are. And sometimes we see ourselves because we can't see the wickedness of our own hearts until the Father can really present to us the wickedness. And the only way that we sometimes really know what is the wickedness within our hearts is when the Father allows us, he takes like almost the carpet from underneath us and allows us to stumble a little bit, and he allows certain trials and certain tests in our lives. And once these tests and trials come in our lives, then we really see what is really there that we could not see, because within ourselves we really think that we walk so righteous before the Father. And yes, he did all the good works. And we must understand something. Don't mistaken your good works before the Father for the fact that he still looks at the intents of the heart. So we can do all the righteous acts before the Father, and we do all these good things. But what is in the heart is what he looks at. The intent of the heart. So yes, on the surface, King Hezekiah was doing all the right things before the Father. He broke down the altars. He reinstated the worship. He opened up the temple. He reinstated the worship to the Father. He made sure he was taking care of the priests and the Levites, and he reinstated worship, and he was praying before the Father. The minute there was a situation, he came, humbled himself before the Father, and he laid prostrate before the Father, and he presented his case. And in all of this, he did right before the Father. But then when he got the victory, what happened in his heart then? Once the Father came and gave him the victory. And you see, this is always the danger. The danger is sometimes when the Father answers the prayer. So say now, for example, we pray to the Father, and we say, for example, it's a person that has never had a child. And this was part of Hezekiah's problem. At the time that he would have died, he would have been without having had children. He was young. I think he was about 39. He was still in his 30s. And at the end of the day, he goes, and he's going to be able to die, and he had no children. And so many times there's like, say, a woman cannot bear children, and the Father gives her a child, and then that very child brings those parents away from the Father. Next minute they stop serving the Father the way that they should, and that child becomes a little idol in people's lives. And so many times we pray prayers at what expense, and this is what we're going to understand with Hezekiah. But you see, Hezekiah is praying, and it seems like a very righteous prayer, especially for the things that he's done in the eyes of the Father, in the works of the flesh. But can he really see what's going on in his own heart? And the word of Yahuwah came to Yeshayahu, saying, Go and say to Hezekiah, Thus said Yahuwah, the allure of David, your father, I have heard your prayer, I have seen your tears. See, I'm adding 15 years to your days. So understand, many times with our bitter tears, we come before the Father and we pray these bitter tears and we ask Him to intervene in our situation. We don't really take the time to find out what is the Father's will in the situation. No, instead, we cry bitterly for Father to be able to answer our soulish prayers. Because this is what we want, and we never take the time to really seek Abba Yahuwah and ask what is His will in the situation. Oh, I know I have sat and I've listened to testimonies of, for example, a woman that is maybe, I know this was a few years ago, a friend of mine, she had a very dear friend that would pray with her, and she was a mother of 2 daughters, one that was 8 years old, another one that was 12 years old, and the mother got leukemia and was going to die. And her husband, a dean of a Bible school, powerful man of Yahuwah, a leader in his church, and she was a right-hand woman to him, and she landed up getting leukemia. And the whole church fasted, and the school fasted, and everybody was fasting for her to be able to survive, for the Father to intervene and to heal her and to deliver her of the sickness. And this friend of mine, they used to pray together once a week. They prayed together for years. She was a very, very close friend of hers. And so another friend of hers said, let us go and pray for her at the hospital. So my friend decided to seek the Father. How many times do we just go and pray for someone and we don't even ask and seek the Father? What is His purpose in what's going on? How many times do we really do that? So she went and she sought the Father for her to have a word from Him in what she needed to pray the next day. And all she heard Him say to her was, you're going to prepare her for death. She said, Father, that cannot be. She's a young woman. She's got her whole life ahead of her. Why would you want to take her life? And He said, I've already extended her life. And now I'm taking her to be with me. And you are going to go there to prepare her for death. And so when she got into that room, she couldn't say anything to her friend. Imagine she's going to tell her friend, oh, by the way, the Father spoke to me and said, I must prepare her for death because she's actually going to die. And so this friend of hers walks in there and immediately starts praying a soulish prayer of healing. And the next thing, she goes and she has an attack and she falls on the floor and they need to carry her out. So the nurses carry her out and my friend stays alone with her, with this woman that is got leukemia. Until she prepares her and says, can you see the angel sitting next to your bed? And she prepared her and prepared her heart, and she needed to surrender a few things and go through a few things to prepare her. And I think it was a day or two later she passed on. And that was very difficult for this friend of mine. But you see, how many times do we really seek the Father to find out what is His will in a situation? Many times we intervene in the Father's perfect will for someone because of our own soulish prayers. And that is why this is so important to be spoken, because we need to understand that there is a way that seems right unto man, but its way will end in death if we do not seek the Father's will in every single situation. Because understand, He sees the end from the beginning. We cannot see. He knew what was going to happen. And He was going to make sure that King Hezekiah, because he was a good king, because he did right in His eyes, He wanted him to be able to die being a good king and being right before Him. But now he comes and he's crying bitterly. And so he says, and out of the hand of the sovereign, go and say to Hezekiah, thus says Yahuwah, Lord, the Eloah of David, your father, I have heard your prayer and I have seen your tears. See, I am adding 15 years to your days. And out of the hand of the sovereign of Ashur, I shall deliver you and the city and protect the city. So there's going to be more things, more times when He's had to deliver him out of the hands of the city, out of the hands of the enemy. And this is the sign to you from Yahuwah that Yahuwah does this word which He has spoken. See, I'm bringing the shadow on the sundial, which has gone down with the sun on the sundial of Ahaz 10 degrees backwards, and the sun returned 10 degrees on the dial by which it has gone down. So He actually even does a miracle, because He tells him that he's on the third day to be able to go present himself in the temple, and He tells him to be able to do this. And then, if we have a look here in 2 Kings, he says, and I shall add to your days, 2 Kings 20 verse 6, and I shall add to your days 15 years and deliver you and the city from the hand of the sovereign, and shall defend the city for my own sake and for the sake of David. And Yeshaya, who said, take a cake of figs, they took and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. And Hezekiah, who said to Yeshayahu, what is the sign that Yahuwah does heal me, and that I shall go up to the house of Yahuwah on the third day? Because this is what the Father said. He had told him, here he says in verse 5, in 2 Kings 20 verse 5, return and say to Hezekiah, the leader of my people, thus says Yahuwah, the Eloah of David, your father, I have heard your prayer, I have seen your tears, see, I'm going to heal you. On the third day, go up to the house of Yahuwah. And so this is when Hezekiah, who said to Yeshayahu, what is the sign that Yahuwah does heal me, and that I shall go up to the house of Yahuwah the third day? And Yeshayahu said, this is the sign for you, Yahuwah, from Yahuwah, that Yahuwah does the word which He has spoken. Shall the show go forward 10 degrees, or the shadow go forward 10 degrees, or go backwards 10 degrees. And Hezekiah, who said, it would be easy for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. No, but let the shadow go backwards 10 degrees. And Yeshayahu, the prophet, cried out to Yahuwah, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backwards, by which it had gone down on the sundial of Ahaz. So here we see that this is a mighty miracle that the Father does for Hezekiah. He doesn't just heal him, He does a miracle. He gets the sun to be able to go backwards. The sundial has got to be able to stop. So He does an absolute miracle for Hezekiah, so that he understands, in these extra 15 days, I'm doing another miracle for you, Hezekiah. I need you to be able to turn to me and understand who I am, because you must understand that I, Yahuwah, am your strength, which is what His name means. I, Yahuwah, am your strength. You have no strength in yourself. There's nothing about you. It's all about me. And so Now we continue to read in verses 9 of Yeshayahu 38. This is the writing of Hezekiah, sovereign of Yehuda, when he had been sick and had recovered from his sickness. So this is the prayer that he had written while he was sick. I said, I am to go into the gates of Sheol in the prime of my life. So you see, now this is what he was crying out, because remember, we just get that he prayed, but this is now what he is crying out. Am I to go into the gates of Sheol in the prime of my life? Shall I be deprived of the rest of my years? I said, I shall not see Yah in the land of the living. I shall no longer look on man with the inhabitants of the world. My dwelling is plucked up, taken from me like a shepherd's tent. I have cut off my life like a weaver. He cuts me off from the loom. From day to night you make an end of me. I soothe myself until morning. Like a lion, he shatters my bones. From day to night you make an end of me. Like a swallow or a thrush, so I chattered. I moaned like a dove. My eyes looked weakly on high. O Yahuwah, I am oppressed. Undertake for me. And so many times in our absolute distress, we cry out to the Father for Him to deliver us without having to truly ask the Father. That is why I have learned one thing, to go deep in prayer when I am going through a situation. The best thing to do is to go deep in prayer and get to the root of the problem. Maybe I've got to go through this thing because it's just a time that I'm going through, that I have to go through. But if there is a root, then I need to get to the root of the problem of why this is happening in my life. And that is the deeper prayer that we need to do. So it's not just a case of where you're going to get sick and now you're going to start to pray for healing. Get to the bottom of the root of what is coming into your life. Because if you don't deal with the root, it's never going to be removed. It's going to keep presenting itself, and you will heal and it will come back again. And that is why you need to get to the bottom of the problem. What do I say? For he has spoken to me, and he himself has acted softly. I go all my years because of the bitterness of my being. I mean, he is really distressed over here. O Yahuwah, by these do men live, and my spirit finds life in all of them. Restore me and make me live. So you see, he was really crying out to him for life. Now, the Father has given him a word to say, you are going to die. Get your life in order. Get your house in order. I am going to choose another king. You do not have an offspring. I am not going to bring the offspring that's going to come from your loins. I am going to choose another offspring, and I am going to continue my kingdom, but it's not going to be from you. That's basically what the Father had said to him. Because right now there is a problem. See, for peace I had what was bitter, but you have lovingly delivered my being from the pit of corruption, for you have cast my sins behind your back. So he acknowledged that there was something that was not right. For Sheol does not thank you, nor death praise you. Those who go down to the pit do not watch for your truth. The living, he is praising you, as I do this day. A father makes known your truth to his children. Now this should have been the very foundation that Hezekiah was supposed to be able to take his own words that he's praying to the Father and put it into practice. Because he's saying, a father makes known your truth to his children. And you see, he didn't have children, so the Father was going to give him an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to then, because of your bitter crying to me and your prayer that you're going on with me here now, I'm going to give you 15 years. You've been saying that a father makes known your truth to his children, and he didn't have children, so how's he going to be making known his truth the father's truth to his children when he doesn't have any. Yahuwah, come to save me, and let us sing my songs with stringed instruments all the days of our life in the house of Yahuwah. For Yeshayahu said, let them take a cake of figs and apply it on the boil, so that he lives. And Hezekiah asked, what is the sign that I go up to the house of Yahuwah? Okay, so then he gets healed on the third day. As he goes up, Father heals his body. So now we are going to go back, and we're going to go back to we are going to go and have a look at 2 Kings. We are going to go to 2 Chronicles 24 verse 31, 24 to 31. Let's go to 2 Chronicles. We go forward to 2 Chronicles so that we can understand why it was that the father had brought sickness upon King Hezekiah. So we go and have a look, and we read from verse 23, and it says, and many brought gifts to Yahuwah at Jerusalem, and presents to Hezekiah, sovereign of Yehudah. And he was exalted in the eyes of all the nations thereafter. In those days Hezekiah was sick and near death, and he prayed to Yahuwah, and he spoke to him and appointed a sign for him. So that was the sign of the sundial. However, take note, however, Hezekiah did not repay according to the good done to him. Wow. So the father spared his life, and he was supposed to repay good for what the father had done to him. For his heart was lifted up. Pride and arrogance still came into his heart. Therefore wrath came upon him and upon Yehudah and Jerusalem. And Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart. So that could have been then the prayer. Again. Then Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of Yahuwah did not come upon them in the days of Hezekiah. So again, he humbled himself before the father because he realized. So you see, why did the father bring sickness upon him? Because of his pride and because of his arrogance. Let's remember, what does the word say? Pride comes before a fall. And he's standing before the father in his absolute arrogance and saying, I've walked perfect before you. I've done nothing before you. I did all these things. And we read the account in the beginning of, when I read from chapter 36, just to give you the foundation of everything that this king did. He did mighty and great, awesome deeds before the Father. And so you see, many of us can do great and awesome deeds before the Father, and at the end of the day, I need you to remember one thing. It's not how you start that matters, it's how you end. And this is the thing that the Father wants us to understand, because it's not how we're going to start, but it's how we're going to end. And so many of us can do great exploits before the Father. But what happens in our lives in the meantime? And this is what we must guard for, because at the end of the day, when the enemy cannot get you in one way, the enemy will come against you in another way. So the enemy wasn't able to get hold of him with the fact that he was learning to be able to stand before the Father with the enemy that was coming up against him. And he reinstated the worship of the Father, and he destroyed all the Asherahs, and he destroyed all the high places of worship. But we see, then Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, and he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of Yahuwah did not come upon them in the days of Hezekiah. And Hezekiah had much riches. Okay, so now we're going to get to the core of the matter, for us to really understand what eventually took this king out. And I want you to be able to let me read these verses, and as I read these verses, I want you to put and just imagine a lot of these prosperity teachers and how they could have started off as these humble men of Yahuwah that also started to preach the word with such humility, and then they exalted themselves and they started to get so much wealth, and eventually it started to get to them. And so therefore we are reading this for us to be able to understand how the enemy comes and takes us out in different areas of our lives. And if he cannot get hold of you in the one area, he will try and get to you in another area. And this is why we have to stay humble before the Father and understand there is the most dangerous thing that comes, and this is what we're going to understand in this teaching, is that at the end of the day, you cannot serve two masters. You will eventually bow to the one or to the other. And so we must understand that is why there is a place for the poor, because the poor have a need of Yahuwah, and many times the rich do not. And so therefore we must remain humble before the Father and understand that the wealth that he has supplied to us is going to take us out if we do not use it for the right reasons. And so let's look and see. And as we're going to read through this, we're going to understand what has been the fall of a lot of ministries, what has been the fall of a lot of churches, what has been the fall in our fellowships that we see, especially in the Christian community, but it even comes into the Torah movement, especially when people start to get a big ministry. And let us just stay humble, and that is one of the things that I ask the Father constantly. Is I say, Father, please help me to stay humble before you. And Hezekiah, who had much riches and esteem, so he had riches and he had esteem, he had glory, he had fame, he had power, he had all of that. And he made himself treasuries for silver and for gold and for precious stones and for spices and for shields and for all desirable utensils. And the storehouses of the harvest of the grain and the wine and the oil and the stalls for all kinds of livestock and folds for flocks. Now you must understand, he did acquire all of this because he started to say to the people that they were he speaks in 2 Chronicles 31. And if you have a look at verse 4, he says, and he said to the people, those who dwelt in Jerusalem, to give the portion for the priests and the Levites so that they are strengthened in the Torah of Yahuwah. And so therefore he wanted them to be able to be taken care of. And so therefore the people started to bring in the supplies that was necessary. And then if you look at verse 8, it says, and Hezekiah, when the leaders came and saw the heaps and they blessed Yahuwah and his people Israel. And Hezekiah, who asked the priests and the Levites about the heaps, and Azariah, who the chief priest from the house of Tzadok, answered him and said, since they began to bring all the offerings into the house of Yahuwah, we have had enough to eat and have plenty left, for Yahuwah has blessed his people, and this great amount is left over. And Hezekiah, who ordered them to prepare rooms in the house of Yahuwah, and they prepared them. And so at the end of the day, these rooms get prepared, and this is for the excess of all the wealth that was starting to come in, which at the end of the day, we need to understand that the wealth is part of the Father's kingdom. And so now look at what it says in the storehouses, and now we go back to 2 Chronicles 32 verses 28, and the storehouses for the harvest of the grain and the wine and the oil and the stalls for all kinds of livestock and folds for flocks. And listen to what happens here now, 29. And he made cities for himself and possessions of great number of flocks and herds, for Yahuwah gave him much property. So you see, this is then what happens. You see, then we obtain all that we want and more, because now we acquire much wealth. And so Hezekiah, who himself had stopped the upper outlet, so this is where we've got the Hezekiah tunnels in Israel. He was the one that was responsible for digging out these Hezekiah tunnels. That is the water that would flow into from the Gihon springs, the Gihon springs. And there is still today where we walk in Israel in the underground tunnels, in the Hezekiah tunnels, because it was him that dug out all these tunnels to be able to bring this water that was being able to be supplied into the Pool of Siloam. And this is where the priest would come and get the water to be able to take it up to the temple. And Hezekiah himself had stopped the upper outlet of the waters of Gihon and directed them into the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his work. And so the Father truly blessed him. But you see, what happened in his heart in the process? He started to boast in what he thought he had achieved. And this is the problem. You see, we study, we do all these things, and we work very hard, and we, acquire all this wealth. But what we tend to forget is that it's never ours to start off with. It was not everything that we did. It was everything that comes from the Father's hand. And we must never, ever forget that. And when the Father requires it of us, we are to openly open our hand and understand that it's not ours, it is His. Freely you were given, and freely you give. However, with the envoys of the princes, okay, now this is where we're really going to be able to see what the Father does. Now listen to verse 31. However, with the envoy of the princes of Babel, whom they sent to ask him about the wonder that was done in the land, Allah left him in order to try him, to know all that was in his heart. So at the end of the day, the Father is going to test us to know what is in our hearts. So He allows us to go down a path, and then He tests us by bringing things into our lives to see, what will you do with that which I give you? Are you truly going to use it for my kingdom, or is it about you and your kingdom? Is it about you building your kingdom, or is it about you building mine? Is this about your stature? It's about you, or is it about me and my people and my kingdom? And so it says, and the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his loving commitment, see. Okay, so now we go back. So understand, verse 31 is telling you, however, with the envoys of the princes, again, however, there we had, however, Hezekiah who did not repay according to the good done to him, for his heart was lifted up, therefore wrath came upon him and upon Yehudah and Jerusalem. So then again, he knows how to repent before the Father, yet now he gets tested again. However, when the envoys of the princes of Babel, whom they sent to ask him about the wonder that was done in the land, Allah left him. So Allah took his hand off him in order to try him, to know all that was in his heart. And so now we go back to reading from Isaiah. We go back to our Isaiah, and we're going to read from Isaiah chapter 39, where we continue with our story. And at that time, Merodach Baladan, son of Baladan, sovereign of Babel. Okay, so this is now the sovereign of Babylon. Sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he heard that he had been sick and had become strong. So now he was sick, but he's now become strong, and he's going to send presents, and he sent a letter. And Hezekiah was pleased with them and showed them the house of his treasures, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious ointment and all his armory and all that was found among his treasures. There was not an object in his house or in all his rule that Hezekiah did not show them. So now he's boasting. So the king of Babel comes there. Oh, this is a mighty king again that is being able to do mighty things. And obviously there is a lot of rumors going on of what the king of Babel is now in the horizon, because obviously Assyria has been taken out the way, and this is the new kid on the block that is now starting to be able to bring destruction in the nations and conquering. And so what does Hezekiah want to do? He wants to impress the king and his princes. He wants to impress them. And Yeshayahu the prophet went to the sovereign Hezekiah and said to him, what did these men say, and from where did they come to you? And Hezekiah said, they came to me from a distant land, from Babel. And he said, what have they seen in your house? And Hezekiah said, they have seen all that is in my house. There is not an object among my treasures that I did not show them. Wow, 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 wow. Pride truly comes before a fall. Now he's boasting. He boasted basically to the king of Babel and the princes. He boasted. He boasted of all the wealth that he's obtained. He boasted of his silver and his gold. And he boasted of everything that he has acquired. Boasting. You should have thought twice, because imagine, this is going to be an enemy. If the enemy knows everything that you have, obviously the enemy is going to want to come against you. But you see, Hezekiah, who is proud in the sense of saying, well, I know that my strength is in my Father, and you're not going to be able to conquer me. So let me show you everything that I have, because my Father is going to protect me, in his boastful, arrogant way. And so if we go have a look at Jeremiah chapter 9, what does Jeremiah chapter 9 tell us? Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 9 so that we can understand what the word says to us about boasting. But let him who boasts boast of this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Yahuwah, doing loving commitment, right ruling, and righteousness in the earth. For in these I delight, declares Yahuwah. So at the end of the day, what should he have been boasting in? Boasting in who Abba Yahuwah is. Boasting in saying, you know what, the only victory that I have, the only thing that I've acquired in these underground tunnels that I've been able to do, all of this wisdom and everything comes from my Yahuwah. You need to know he is the only one that you are to serve. And he's the one who does loving commitment. And he's the one who does right ruling. And he's the one who's righteousness on the earth. He's the only righteous one on the earth. Because this is what he's requiring. But you see, at the end of the day, what did we read in 2 Kings chapter? No, not in Kings, in Chronicles. What did we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 20? What did we read? We read, however, with the envoy of the princes of Babel, whom they sent to ask him about the wonder that was done in the land, Allah left him in order to try him, to know all that was in his heart. So you see, that was a test for Hezekiah. So how many times we are confronted with tests that we don't even know that we're being tested by the Father, because the Father wants to be able to take us to the next level, but he will not take us past the last disobedience, or he will not take us past the place that he sees that there is still a wicked thing in our hearts, that he cannot take us to the next level because we will not be ready, because we will self-destruct if he has to take us to the next level. So we must understand exactly what it is that the Father is wanting to be able to reveal to us here in this day. And this is why this story of this king is presented to us 3 times, so that we may understand, so that we do not go down this road. I have been preaching about King Hezekiah for years, where I have had to understand, do not pray your soulish prayer, my child. You better seek me, and before you do anything, seek me in all things. Because you need to understand, I am the one who's about your life. I'm the one who knows exactly what it is that's going on in your life. And before you start to pray your soulish prayer, first you come and seek my face. And so I don't just pray for the sake of praying. Because if I pray my own soulish prayer, I could stand against what the Father is wanting to do in somebody else's life or in my life. But how many times we just pray for the sake of praying, but we don't even seek the Father to find out if what I'm praying is in line with his will. And so in everything, we need to understand that we need to seek his will in all things. And so now we have a look at Matthew. And so let's just end of the story. So let's just continue to read in Isaiah. And it turns around and it says, and he said, what have they seen? So we go back to Isaiah 39 verses 4, and he said, what have they seen in your house? And Hezekiah said, they have seen all that is in my house. There is not an object among my treasures that I did not show them amongst my treasures. Wow. Was it all your treasures? Or did the treasure really belong to Abba Yahuwah and he's made you a steward over the treasures? But you see, when we think everything is ours, there is the danger. Because all of a sudden it's all about me, myself and I. Oh, I acquired it. But what you don't understand is when the Father raises up a king, the Father raises up a king because he has need of that king for his people, for his kingdom, in what he wants to be done and for what he needs to be done. And that is why the Father has removed many kings, specifically in this time of when we've gone through this time of where this plague hit us. Interesting. A lot of kings were removed. Why? What have they done with the wealth that has been given to them? We are coming into a very, very important time where the Father is needing people to be in a time now of where he's going to have places for people to be protected. But what have they done? You see, whose kingdom are we building? Are we building our own kingdom, or are we building the Father's kingdom at the end of the day? Because that is the question that we need to ask ourselves. Is everything still about the Father, or is everything about my kingdom? And you see, this is what happens to the kings. Eventually, it's about myself. And this is what happened to King Hezekiah. He built cities for himself. Was that really necessary? Was it really necessary? And so Yeshayahu said to Hezekiah, hear the word of Yahuwah of hosts. See, the days are coming when all that is in your house and what your fathers have stored up until this day, so it wasn't just from you, your fathers have stored it up too, and my people have provided it, shall be taken away to Babel. Not a matter shall be left, declares Yahuwah. Now listen to the arrogance. And they shall take some of your sons who are born to you, whom you bring forth, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the sovereign of Babel. And Hezekiah said to Yeshayahu, listen to this man. From where has he fallen? And Hezekiah said to Yeshayahu, the word of Yahuwah which you have spoken is good. Now all of a sudden the word of Yahuwah is good. But the word of Yahuwah was not good when he was telling him he was going to die. But now he's telling him, your children and your descendants and your people are going to go into Babylon because of what you have done. And instead of him renting his clothes and repenting before the Father for what he's done as he's done before, when he rent his clothes before the Father, when he knew that the enemy was on his doorstep, all he was interested was his pride. Oh no, I need to be known amongst all the people that I was a good king, that I did good. I don't care what's going to happen after me. I'm going to die in 15 years' time anyway, so who cares? As long as I know that in my time, in my kingdom, these people did not go into Babylon. To hell with what happens afterwards. Doesn't matter to me. Do you see this king now humbling himself before the Father? When Yeshayahu came to him and said to him, you are going to die, did he say those words? Did he say, the word of Yahuwah which ye have spoken is good? Is that what he said? Oh no. He came and cried bitterly before the Father. But now, because it's only about me, myself and I and my kingdom, to hell with the rest of the people. If they're going to go to hell, who cares anyway? As long as my house and me is going to be saved, then that's cool. I'm fine. And where are we? Do we have the heart for the Father's people, or do we only have the heart for myself? And wait, for my own too. Yet he's being told, your children are going to go into Babylon. So what should he have done? He should have now immediately started to train up his children. He's just said a prayer. and the living, he is praising you as I do this day. A father makes known your truth to his children. But you see, what was the heart of this king? He started a good king. It was said of him that there was no king like him that did as much as what he did before him. But what happened to him? Became arrogant. So now what happens? Let's just first go and see what it says in the renewed covenant, because let's go to Matthew chapter 6. What I say to you is you cannot serve two masters, and this is exactly what has happened to Hezekiah. You cannot serve two masters. You're either going to bow to the one or to the other. And hear me what I say to you today. If you do not have your heart in the right place, and if you've not dealt with idols in your heart, and if money is still an issue in your life, you must understand that the days are coming now when you are going to be tested in who you're going to bow to. Because when it's all going to be taken away from you, what are you going to stand on then? What are you going to do then? Who are you going to bow down to then? Because this is going to be confronted, many people. And so that is why in Matthew chapter 6 from verses 19 to 25 it says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart shall be also. So is that not so true of King Hezekiah? There where his treasure is, there his heart was also. So what was he doing? Boasting of all the treasure that he has acquired. And that is where his heart was. His heart was where his treasure was. Because at the end of the day, his acts show. That's why the Father removed his hand from him, to show him what was in his heart. That's what his act showed. His act showed where his treasure was. Where his treasure was is where his heart was. So his heart is either going to be with Yahuwah, or his heart is going to be with his finances, with his wealth, and with everything else that he owned. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore the eye is good, all the body shall be enlightened. But if your eye is evil, all your body shall be darkened. If then the light that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So understand, he saw himself as being good because everything that he had done for the Father, he saw himself in his righteous acts that he was doing, in all these external things that he was doing. It was very good before the Father, and he felt that he was so profoundly good before the Father in all the things that he did for him. But what was going on in his heart? Do you understand why the Father is dealing with the hearts of, why he's dealing with our hearts? Because it's our heart that is wicked at the end of the day. It's our heart that is causing us to stumble at the end of the day. Now he says, no one is able to serve two masters. You see, this was Hezekiah. No one is able to serve two masters. For either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cleave to the one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Allure and Mammon. Because of this, I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat or drink, or about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food, and body more than clothing? And we better understand this in the days that are going to come ahead of us, because we will be tested and tried in this area. Wherever our heart is, whatever is the God that we are going to serve, we will bow down to. If you're going to want to save your life, you are going to lose it. That's exactly what happened to King Hezekiah. He wanted to save his life and he lost it. But whoever loses his life for my name's sake shall surely save it. And this is what we must understand. And that is why we will close off with going to read a little bit about what happens with his son, Manasseh, and then Manasseh's son, so that we can understand that this was the king that was boasting before the Father in his prayer in Isaiah 38 verses 19, saying, the living, the living. So he wants to be the living because he wants to live. And he didn't want to die and not have an heir. So he wanted to live and bear children, because up until that time, he hadn't bared any children. Now he wants to bear children, and he wants to be a father. And a father makes known your truths to his children. So now, father, in those 15 years, gives him children. Opens his wife's womb, and she bears children. Now let's look at the children that comes from this mighty king that done so much before the father. Let's look at 2 Chronicles Chapter 33, and we are going to read from verses 1 to 6. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. So obviously his father died after 15 years. He was given 15 years of life. After 15 years he died. And Manasseh must have been the oldest one that then became king. And he reigned 55 years. Imagine, 55 years he reigned. 55 years. But did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, according to the abominations of the nations, whom Yahuwah dispossessed from before the children of Israel. So understand, this was the very child that he's crying out to the Father to be able to have of his flesh, because he wants to teach him the ways of the Father. But listen to what happens, because how wicked did his heart become in the end. What was the purpose of his life in the end? What was the focus of his life in the end? For again he rebuilt the high places which Hezekiah, who his father had broken down. Now understand, if his father had truly taught him the Torah, because you see, let us go back and let us read what it says in Deuteronomy. Let's just go back to Deuteronomy chapter 17 before we continue here. Just keep your hand there, because we're going to continue reading it. Because you see, if Hezekiah, who was reading the Torah, and if he was a king that was being able to be led by the Torah, he was led by the Torah to a certain extent until he started to become prideful and arrogant in his heart. And now listen to what he says in Deuteronomy chapter 17 from verses 15. You shall certainly set a sovereign over you, whom Yahuwah your Lord shall choose. Set a sovereign over you from among your brothers. You are not allowed to set a sovereign over you who is not your brother. Only he is not to increase horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Mitzrayim to increase horses, for Yahuwah has said to you, do not return that way again. And he is not to increase wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor is he greatly to greatly increase silver and gold for himself. So he's not to increase silver and gold for himself. What did Hezekiah do? Increased greatly silver and gold for himself. And it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his reign, that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah in a book from the one before the priests, the Levites. So you see, the Levites and the priests were teaching the Torah. Why was the king not reading and listening to the Torah? Or did he just become too famous and too important for that, just like King Solomon? See, the very thing that took King Solomon out in the end. King Solomon started a good king as well. And how did he end? And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he learns to fear Yahuwah. So see, he was to read it so that he learns to fear Yahuwah, his Eloah, and guard all the words of this Torah and these laws, to do them. But yet he's speaking lip service out of his mouth to say, give me children so that I can teach them the ways of the Father. But then he gets children, and does he teach him the ways of the Father? Because the word says, in Proverbs 22 verse 6, it says, train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he turns not away from it. So train up a child in the ways that he's to go, in Yahuwah, in his ways, so that when he gets old, he does not depart from it. But is this what the king did? No. So that his heart, now listen, he learns to fear Yahuwah, his Eloah, and guard all the words of this Torah and these laws, to do them, so that his heart is not lifted up above his brothers, and so as not to turn aside from the command, right or left, precept upon precept, command upon command, is what he was supposed to be doing. Right or left, so that he prolongs his days in his reign. So you see, this is how he was going to prolong his days in his reign. So when he doesn't do this, he doesn't prolong his days in his reign. And this is in the Torah, Father will remove the king because he's done evil. So if he wants to prolong his days in his reign, he does what is right in the eyes of the Father, and he and his children in the midst of Israel. This is the word of Yahuwah. And this is what Hezekiah was supposed to do. And now here comes his son. And what is his son doing? For again he rebuilds the high places which Hezekiah, his father, had broken down. We are back in 2 Chronicles chapter 33 from verses 3. And again he rebuilt the high places which Hezekiah, his father, had broken down, and raised up slaughter places for the Baals, and made Asherim, and bowed himself to all the hosts of the heavens, and served them. And he built slaughter places in the house of Yahuwah, of which Yahuwah had said, in Jerusalem is my name forever. He was not to build any other slaughter places to any other god. And he made his sons pass through the fire in the valley of the sons of Hinnom. So now he dedicates his sons, makes them go through the fire, and he's dedicating them now to be able to give them to the king of Baal, to the god of Baal worship, the valley of the son of Hinnom, and practiced magic, used divination, witchcraft, consulted mediums, and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of Yahuwah to provoke him. And he placed a carved image of the idol which he had made in the house of Eluah, of which Eluah had said to David and Shlomo his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen to put all my tribes of Israel, I put my name forever. And he sets up all these idols. And listen to verse 9. And Manasseh led Yehudah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem astray to do more evil. So you see, instead of him repent, if Hezekiah who had just repented before the Father, rented his heart before the Father, humbled himself before the Father and said, Father, I understand I have done wrong. Please, will you spare my children, and will you spare my descendants? And please, can you come up against this word that has been spoken of the prophet? Please, just like you've changed, just like you gave me 15 years, and just like you gave me these 15 years, and now, even if I've only got 2 years left, even if I've only got a year left, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I bring my children up right. Did he do that? No. And now listen to what is happening. And Manasseh led Yehudah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem astray to do more evil than the nations whom Yahuwah had destroyed before the children of Israel. So he did even more evil than all the other nations that were around them. And Yahuwah spoke to Manasseh and to the people, but they did not listen. But praise Abba Yahuwah, you see, we get to verse 12. And when he was in distress, he sought the face of Yahuwah his Eluah, and humbled himself greatly before Eluah of his fathers, and he prayed to him, and he was moved by his entreaty, and heard his supplication, and brought him back to Jerusalem into his reign. And Manasseh knew that Yahuwah was Eluah. So praise the Father, in the end he humbled his knee. And he remembered that there was a Yahuwah, or maybe the priests came to him or something and said, look, my king, there's only one way. And then verse 15, he removed all the foreign mighty ones and the idols from the house of Yahuwah, and all the slaughter places that he had built in the mount of the house of Yahuwah and in Jerusalem, and he threw them out of the city. And he built the slaughter place of Yahuwah, and he slaughtered slaughterings of the peace offerings and thank offerings on it, and ordered Yehudah to serve Yahuwah, Eluah of Israel. But he's reigned now for all these years. All these years he's done evil. Now he's trying to tell the people, turn back to the Father. But the people were still slaughtering on the high places, though only to Yahuwah the Eluah. And then the rest of the acts of Manasseh. So Manasseh slept with his fathers, verse 20. Then you get verse 21. Yes, this is now Manasseh's son, he's gone and dedicated to the Baals. And only right at the end he's doing right, only then he's doing what's right in the eyes of the Father. Only then. And so now he turns around and look and see what happens. Ammon was 22 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 22 years in Jerusalem. But he did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, as his father Manasseh had done. And Ammon slaughtered to all the carved images which his father Manasseh had made, and served them. And he did not humble himself before Yahuwah, as his father Manasseh had humbled himself. For Ammon trespassed more and more. So you see, at least Manasseh did evil, but right at the end of his life, he made right, and he came right. And he would have died a good king because he did right. So you see, it's not how you start, it's how you end. And his servants conspired against him and killed him in his own house. And then in chapter 34, Yoshiyahu was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the eyes of Yahuwah, and walked in the ways of his father David, and did not turn aside right or left. And in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the allure of his father David. And in the 12th year, he began to cleanse Yehudah and Jerusalem from the high places and the Asherim and the carved images and the molded images. And so that is why he was such a powerful king. And that's why in verse 14 it says, and when they brought out the silver that was brought into the house of Yahuwah, Hilkiyahu the priest found the book of the Torah of Yahuwah given by Moshe. I listen to what happens in verse 19. And it came to be when the sovereign heard the words of the Torah that he tore his garments. And the sovereign commanded Hilkiyahu, Akiam, and all the priests, go inquire of Yahuwah for me, for him who is left in Israel and in Yehudah, concerning the words of the book that is found. For great is the wrath of Yahuwah that is poured out on us, because our fathers have not guarded the word of Yahuwah to do according to all that is written in this book. So do you see? So praise Abba Yahuwah. When the king does what is right in the eyes of Yahuwah and brings the people back to the ways of Yahuwah, then there will be a blessing. But look and see what happens to our children's children if we continue to do what is evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. Until eventually it is so bad that eventually they do get taken out by Babylon and only a very few remnant remains. Exactly what Yeshayahu had spoken. And so this is a mighty lesson for us to be able to have learned what the Father wanted to show us with his mighty King. And so that is so much of a wealth that we need to learn as we then from now on start to embark from chapter 40 onwards, which is really going to be about the promises, about the comfort of his people, where Yeshayahu now is going to comfort his people. And so we praise Abba Yahuwah for everything that he has done and for this wonderful revelation that is given about this king. And so that we may be able to take heed and look within ourselves and see, where are we in this situation? Do we still pray our own soulish prayers for what we want and stop the hand of Yahuwah in how he wants to deal with us and how he wants to change our lives? We have to be able to humble ourselves before him, because many times Father brings things into our lives in order to humble us to our knees. Not that we should be seeking him just for the healing, but that we should seek him to be able to find out what is it that is there that is standing between us and him. So may Abba bless you all. May you have a blessed week. Shalom, shalom.